So good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is AJ Ehrenstein. I'm Dean of Beyond Barnard here at the college. I've been here for about 3.5 years, excited to be entering my third summer. If you can't tell, by the way, I'm actually on campus, which is awesome. It's a beautiful day here in Morningside Heights. For those of you who are in New York City, you know that. For those of you who are farther afield, it's one of the few days on the calendar that you can be jealous climactically of New York City. I'm super excited to get outside this afternoon. Thanks in the meantime for those of you who are spending some time today inside talking to me about the Fulbright student program. Barnard is an exceptional producer of Fulbright students. We have been for many years. Last year, we actually broke the institution's 75-year record. 75-year record since the start of Fulbright. I was like, wait a minute, Barnard's been around for 125. 75-year record with the most Fulbright students ever named, 9 last year. And we are hoping that this next cohort next year will be even larger. So thanks again for participating. Today's session will be recorded. A reminder that if you ask questions using your voice will be recorded. Feel free to send questions in the chat for those of you who may have shown up late and did not hear my quick note about this before we got started. I should mention, by the way, that our brand new fellowships advisor, Beyond Barnard's second full-time fellowships advisor, will join on June 1st. Her name is Molly Freitas. We're extremely excited that she'll be joining us from West Point, where she spent the last several years. She was also previously the fellowships director at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And she will be your primary point of contact as we really get going into this season of applications to Fulbright. So I'm a little bit of a stopgap, but have spent much of the last year advising some of our Fulbright candidates as well. So I'll do my best today to introduce you to the program with which I've been familiar for several years now, and then you'll get even more expert advice from Molly when she starts in just 12 days. Here's my plan. I'm going to open up by talking about the fellowship generally and say a few things about eligibility for the Fulbright student program. I'll move into application components, what you can expect to have to submit for Fulbright. I'll talk about factors in selection, and here I'm going to provide a little bit of color commentary on what we've seen from Barnard candidates who've been selected as either students, recipients of the fellowship, or even as alternates, which is itself a kind of accomplishment and a pretty tough one, especially in the last few years with many, many applicants. I'll give you a sense of the general timeline, and I'll also give you some idea, because Molly's not here quite yet. I know many of you are probably chomping at the bit. I've met with some of you individually to talk about your Fulbright aspirations, but I want to give you a couple of ideas of things you can get started on, regardless of whether you can get in the next 48 hours to meet individually with Beyond Barnard. There are a few things that we really hope that you'll get underway on as you prepare your application so that you're ready when you first meet with Molly throughout this summer. You'll have some things already in process. And then I'll end off with some observations, some discussion, and then time for questions and answers. I'm a big fan of Zoom calls that end on time, as those of you who have endured my spiels before. So we will do our best to end right at 4 p.m. here on the East Coast. So first of all, about the fellowship and your eligibility requirements, but also for those of you who don't know me, I'm AJ. I'm getting sick of this slide. I've done it all year. I don't know some of you all, but I use he, him pronouns. I've been dean since, like I said, 2018. That's my whole life on the screen. Just so you get to know a little bit about me since we can't be in person. That's my wife, Gina. She is 7.8 months pregnant. We're expecting our first, a son, in just a few short weeks. Very excited about that. That's my family, the OG Ehrensteins. I'm a bad skier and I do love it though. So for those of you who love throwing yourselves down mountains, I do too. I'm a New Yorker, grew up eating pizza, still eating pizza. I was in Chicago for 7 years, but I'm super excited to be back here now for 5 years. I'm a dog person. I will endure cats after allergy medicine. I write on the side. Most recently, maybe some of you saw, I wrote this dorky article in the New York Times about the history of resumes. I'll throw a link in the chat when I get a moment at some point. And yes, I have been Millie, but that's because I throw myself into this Barnard place, y'all. I love my work here. It has been really fun to support all of you, both students and alumni, across the last several years. So that's just a little bit about me. In general, I think it's great to start, and you'll see throughout the presentation just pictures of recent Fulbright students from Barnard to show you that it really does happen for students and alumni every year. This is Sophie Edelman, who was an ETA, which is to say the English Teaching Assistantship recipient in 2019 in Portugal. Fulbright's mission is very specific. It is to increase mutual understanding between the people of the United States and people of other countries through exchange. What I think is distinctive about Fulbright, and what I think is important for you all to think about as you embark upon your reflection on whether Fulbright is a good fit for you and whether you want to participate in this program, is that it really emphasizes the importance of cultural exchange between the US and other places around the world. This is not the case for every kind of fellowship, right? This is not the case for some fellowships that will just support graduate research abroad and really emphasize independent study. Instead, you really have to be thinking when you apply about how you're a good candidate for bringing awareness about the US abroad and for how your experience abroad will help you bring something culturally back to the United States. I think this is at the core of Fulbright's mission. And I'm going to say a few things throughout the presentation today that are really specific to Fulbright that I think are important to emphasize when you're applying. These are directly from the Fulbright's presentation about what Fulbright is. And this is Lynn Dow, who is ETA in class of 2020. She's on her Fulbright, I believe, right now in Vietnam. Fulbright really does strive to reflect the diversity of the United States and societies abroad. So this has become increasingly evident in the way that they emphasize the importance of diversity, especially across the last year. So I think that's important to reflect. It's an important part about American society, and it's something that's central to the mission of the institution. I would say that there are just a couple of other basic things about eligibility criteria to reflect. So Fulbright, because it's a State Department sponsored initiative, it is, they're very clear that the opportunities are open to people regardless of their race, color, I'm just going to read this, national origin, sex, age, religion, geographic location, socioeconomic status, disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity. So I think it's important. They always emphasize this at the beginning of their presentations, and I just wanted to make sure that that language was reflected right at the front for you all. Who is Fulbright open to? And this is Inem Richardson, who went to Burkina Faso and was also a critical language scholarship in Brazil, graduated last year. Fulbright's open to graduating seniors. It's also open to recent graduates and graduate students. So for those of you who may be current graduate students, you may be applying as an affiliate with your graduate institution, although in my experience, I know individuals have sought Barnard's institutional endorsement in the past and have been able to get it through the process through Barnard. For those of you who've been out for several years, Fulbright is open to early career professionals, including artists and musicians. And I would say that in the past, there's roughly about probably a 40-60 mix alumni to current students who are involved in the Barnard application process. So we really do see a good mix of both students and alumni applying every year. I do want to be upfront, and for those of you who, I just want to be clear that US citizenship by the application deadline is important. It's a central criteria. So Fulbright is one of those scholarships that's only open to US citizens. You have to not have a doctorate at the time of your application. I don't think that's an issue for any of the folks that I know who are alums on the call, and certainly not for current students who will be applying this fall after the completion of their senior year. And there may be country-specific requirements. And this is something I'll say a few times throughout the presentation today. It's really important after today. One of the things that you get started on is familiarizing yourself with country-specific Fulbright Commission websites that may outline specific requirements, potentially around language or potentially around the amount of time that you are allowed to or preferred to have spent in the country in order to be eligible to apply. So that is, like I said, one thing is to start familiarizing yourself with country-specific requirements that may be attendant to places you want to conduct your Fulbright. In terms of the benefits, they are many. Recipients receive round-trip airfare, a monthly stipend, you get benefits while you're abroad through the program. You may have support for dependents. So the second section is basically dependent upon country and program. There may be an additional research allowance. You may have access to tuition remission. You may have the ability to learn languages through programs that are supported by the Fulbright Commission. You may have cohort-based activities in the country where you're conducting study, and there may be disability-related accommodations depending on the country as well. So Paige Lerman, class of 18, my first cohort, and she was in Australia, her Fulbright year. So I would say that the benefits, though, really extend beyond. And I want you to start thinking about Fulbright as more than just the funding that you get to support either your English teaching or your research abroad, right? Fulbright is really about a lifelong community. It has to do with entering into this enormous number of people who have received the fellowship previously. And I think that the alumni community is one of the best benefits of being a Fulbright. For the rest of your career, you'll have the ability to connect with other individuals who participated in a similar kind of experience abroad. You'll have access to alumni through the State Department's alumni website, and you'll also be eligible for 12 months of non-competitive eligibility within the federal government. So that means that hiring in the federal government is streamlined for Fulbright candidates. And I think this speaks to something that's related to Fulbright's mission. They want individuals who can come back from abroad and give back in public service if that's something that's interesting to you. You also, unlike Barnard, have lifetime access to a Fulbright domained email address, though I know that those of you who are graduated in the last couple of years, you now have alum.barnard.edu, which I know is cold comfort. People hate it when they have to leave that at barnard.edu. But if you're a Fulbright, you can be at fulbright.gov for the rest of your life. There's also events and activities associated with the Fulbright Association that you'll have the ability to participate in. And that's Greta Schatz, class of 20, who headed off to Russia. Questions so far, feel free to throw them in the chat. That's basic criteria of eligibility and some basic components that are part of the experience. What can you expect in terms of submitting your application? And here I want to start saying a few things about how I think effective candidates that I've worked with in the past couple of years have begun outlining and thinking about, especially I think the two most important components, which are the statement of grant purpose and the personal statement. So you'll be asked first and foremost to provide basic personal data, address, name, rank, serial number. You graduated from Barnard. You'll be asked to write these several essays, and some countries do have some specific short essays that will be supplemental, but really the core of your application materials are going to be the statement of grant purpose and the personal statement. And one of the most common questions that we get, especially when individuals are just starting to apply, is what is the difference between the statement of grant purpose and the personal statement? And I should mention that there's a really good set of resources on the Fulbright website that you can access and that I'll send in the follow-up email today. Questions you should be asking yourself in composing both of these documents. I should note just one tiny distinction too. For the research program, the study program, it's a 2-page maximum for the statement of grant purpose. And for ETA, English Teaching Assistantship, it's 1-page maximum. The first thing to say about the statement of grant purpose is that it is a forward-looking document. So it should propose a project or course of study that you will complete during your Fulbright that aligns with the mission of the project, of the program. Your project should be feasible. It is not going to be to address global economic structural inequality. It has to be something that's delimited, something that fits within a discipline, something that potentially aligns with your academic course of study as an undergraduate student, with your professional ambitions after being an undergraduate student, or if you're currently enrolled in a graduate program, your graduate research. It should align productively, or as I often say, productively misalign, which is to say your project should take what you have done previously and explore new directions that potentially you didn't have time to study previously. But your project or course of study should be able to be completed within the grant period. That is to say, it needs to be something that is time-bound in a manner that it's possible to communicate to a person that it is reasonable to assume that you can complete this project in the amount of time allocated to a Fulbright student in the country to which you're applying. Right? I think this is one of the biggest challenges. It's the scope of the project and the capacity to convey that you can complete it in a year's time. The strongest statements of grant purpose, in my experience, have a clear articulation of who you're going to work with in order to accomplish your research project if you are conducting research, and where you're interested in teaching English if you are planning to teach English. Right? It'll have a very clear idea of what you want to accomplish, why you want to accomplish it, and how what you want to accomplish fits with Fulbright's mission. I want to say that like as many possible times as I can, right? So I think that's, and I'll say this again towards the end, it is really important to articulate how your project fits with Fulbright specifically, and is not just a research project that could be funded by any old scholarship program. So when you're reflecting on how you want to put together your Fulbright application, thinking about how the project that you're proposing will increase intercultural dialogue is important. And I think, again, one of the things that you can do to help the commission understand why you're a good fit for Fulbright is to be really specific in what you're trying to accomplish during the grant period. Hopefully, in addition to what you're accomplishing and the fact that you'll complete it in the time period allocated to you, you'll also talk a little bit about what the steps are to completing your project. This is, again, if you're conducting research. What archives do you plan to take advantage of in the country where you are going to be conducting work? What ethnographic work will you need to complete? What resources will you tap into when you're on the ground in country? What are the specific steps that you plan to take in order to achieve your research objectives during the coming year of study? If you're writing a statement of grant purpose for being a teacher, it's important to articulate why you want to teach English in this specific country context. You can certainly talk a little bit about, in the statement of grant purpose, how your previous experience contributes to the reader's understanding of why you're interested in teaching and why you would be an effective teacher. But you really want to talk a little bit about why you want to teach in the specific country context where you are applying. Right? So it's not just about wanting to get away to a foreign country, right? You have to have a very specific assessment of what you want to accomplish in a particular country context. The personal statement, by contrast, I would say is a present and backwards looking document. So the statement of grant purpose articulates for the commission what you hope to achieve as a Fulbright. The personal statement, this one-page maximum document in 12-point Times New Roman font, it's the State Department, the official font of the State Department is Times New Roman, is present and backward-looking. And here you want to talk not just about your research or teaching, about the meat of what you're trying to accomplish in the program. You want to talk about who you are as a person. This is a much more open forum for you to talk about different factors that make you who you are, right? And I think it's important to delineate these things from one another. To the extent that you are saying something about yourself and your experience in the statement of grant purpose, it's oriented towards trying to articulate why you are the right researcher to conduct this work as a Fulbright. In the personal statement, you want to go a little bit more into biographical details. What are the factors that brought you to Barnard? What are the factors that brought you to your course of study? What are some specific moments in your life trajectory that have made you the person you are now, which is to say a person who wants to apply to Fulbright? What I'm trying to emphasize there is this is not an opportunity just to write a biography of yourself. It's a chance to write a biography of yourself as an individual who is a strong candidate for Fulbright. So I get a lot of questions. I've seen these before editing these statements. Should I, is this an open-ended creative project? Is this kind of like a college essay? And I think no. People are used to writing personal statements for college most often. For those of you who are enrolled in master's programs right now, or even potentially law school or MBA or PhDs, you may be used to writing more than one different type of personal statement. But when most people that I've advised apply for Fulbright, their experience writing personal statements is largely related to their college essay. And I think the substantive difference really is in this. Fulbright is not an open-ended creative exercise to talk about your life story. It is instead, I think, a prompt that implicitly asks you to say, who are you in the context of a Fulbright application? That's my introductory spiel about these two documents. I would say that one of the things that you can start doing right now is taking a look at the Fulbright website to get an idea of the discussion questions or the questions for self-reflection that they use to help you start to promote your thinking about these two different essays, and to start to craft an outline. We're still very much in advance. I'll talk about deadlines in a little bit, but it's only May. I think it's really important, and it rewards candidates when they outline, when they have a clear sense of what they're trying to accomplish in these essays before they even start to draft them. A couple of other things just to highlight here. You may be required to submit a foreign language evaluation. You will be required to submit 3 references. And here I would want you to, I'll get to your, Molly, I see your question and I see another question coming in. I'll get to these in just a second. 3 references. And this is an additional task that I have put down as something that you can get started on right away. Your 3 references can come from a combination of different parts of your life. I typically recommend that the faculty who know you best at Barnard, or if you're in a graduate program right now and applying through Barnard, people who know you and your work best, with a bonus if the faculty who's writing you a letter of recommendation has something specific to say from their own research or from an affiliation with an institution to which you are going to apply to be associated with as a Fulbright, if they can say something specific about those things. I want to say right now is the time, right before we get into the heart of summer, to approach faculty, to discuss your interests in applying for Fulbright, and to ask very straightforwardly, would you be open to writing a strong letter of recommendation for me for a Fulbright? Very often, this is, I feel, one of the biggest differences between amount of stress that individuals feel versus amount of stress that is actually, seems warranted. So faculty are typically delighted to write these letters. They do this all the time. It is their pride and joy to write a letter of recommendation for someone who wants to continue to conduct research or bring teaching abroad. But I do think that you should ask some specific questions when approaching faculty to ask them about a letter of recommendation. You should ask them not only about whether they can write you a strong letter based on what they know about your work, but about their ideas about what could be a good research project for Fulbright. Involve faculty in the conversations that you are having about what constitutes a strong project within your field and within their field. I want to back up just a little bit and get to some of the questions that have come in. There's a question about country competitiveness that I'll get to later in the program because it's one that I offer a lot. So 2 questions. One is, how would the statement of grant purpose differ if you're applying for a grant for a graduate program? I think that you want to say, and I'm sure this will be for some of you, I think the biggest mistake here is just to stop at, I'm applying for this graduate program because it's the best in my field, right? I'm applying to this particular program because it aligns with my previous experience and it makes sense for me as the next step. What you want to say is, I'm applying to this graduate program to conduct master's level study in international policy. Specifically, I am looking to research X, Y, and Z. The research context of this master's program is the strongest fit for me for Fulbright because of A, B, and C. You want to be really specific, not only that you're applying for a master's, but that this is the right program and that Fulbright is the right scholarship to fund that intellectual endeavor. So you want to be specific about what you want to achieve in the program, and you want to, as best as possible, try to articulate why Fulbright is a good fit to fund that study. I should say too, This can happen. It doesn't happen very often. For those of you who are applying to master's programs, who are thinking about Fulbright as a means of studying graduate study, of supporting graduate study in an institutional context, it's important that you also follow the deadlines for applying to those programs as well. Get a question about references being from faculty, or can they be from employers? Should they be exclusively from collegiate faculty? Or so a couple of similar questions came in privately and generally. And although I think it's important, this is not dogma, this is my personal take, I would say this to anyone who's seeking my advice about applying to Fulbright. I think it's important to have at least some faculty who can speak to the quality of your academic work at Barnard. And if you're currently in a graduate program, you can have faculty from that program as well. But I think that it can certainly be a mix of previous employers, particularly if these employers can speak to your capacity to work independently, particularly if your work is related in some way to your research or professional interests, particularly if your work involves a language competency that you would be leveraging as a Fulbright student. And if, of course, your current work, let's say you're working on gender rights in New York City as a legal advocate, and you want to go study gender rights in Malawi, that's a great person to talk about your long-term commitment to the very area of interest that you're looking to expand your work. So the short answer is yes, you can have a mix of faculty and employers. I cannot speak to specific preferences within individual country commissions. This is something you can reserve for questions for Molly when she joins. There may be certain countries where it's better to have more faculty, better to have more employers. I don't get the sense that that's the case. I can't speak specifically about that right now, but certainly you can be having conversations with faculty and others in your life who have experienced the quality of your work and your commitment to X area of interest, be it English teaching, be it tutoring, be it gender advocacy or racial equity or structural inequality or romantic poetry, whatever it is that you're hoping to study as a Fulbright. Anyone who can speak to your commitment to that area can be a strong reference for you. I want to say one thing here about the campus committee evaluation. This letter is crafted by Barnard. It'll be crafted by Molly on your behalf under Barnard's letterhead. This is essentially the institutional endorsement that goes with your Fulbright application. Barnard writes this letter for every Fulbright applicant that we decide to recommend to Fulbright. I'm going to reserve, I know there are going to be questions about what are my odds of being a Barnard nominee. I will get to that in just a second. But keep in mind that there may be other supplemental materials. So if an affiliation letter is required, if you are applying and you need to confirm your official affiliation with an institution, you may be asked to reach out to that institution and have a faculty member or other individual at that institution verify that you will be associated with that institution while you are abroad. And finally, for those of you who may be applying for the creative arts, you may be required to submit a portfolio of materials or other supplemental information just to give the commission a sense of your artistic practice. I'll pause there. I'm going to take a swig of water and give people time to type questions in, or you can certainly come off mute at that point and let me know what's on your mind right now. Hearing none, seeing none, onward we go. This is Ellie Wida. She's class of 2019, chemistry major, went to Romania and is now a Gates Cambridge scholar, which is another way of saying, I don't know if we have, I should have asked this. Is anybody like a first year sophomore or junior on the call? Can you throw an emoticon up? Nice, I love it. Love the energy, love to see you all here. And I just want to say here, fellowship success breeds fellowship success. There's far too much hesitance on Barnard's campus applying to fellowships, far too much concern about, well, this isn't for me, or people like me don't get these fellowships. You cannot win one of these things if you're not in the competition to begin with. And I would say that for those of you who are currently still enrolled, it's a great idea to think about other fellowships. Maybe you heard about some in Christine's orientation to fellowships yesterday. Certainly you're welcome to check out. I'll include a link in the chat to our competitive fellowships database. Thinking about applying to fellowships is great because it allows you to reflect on your intellectual goals, and getting smaller fellowships can add up to bigger ones later down the line. And that certainly happened with Ellie, who first won a Fulbright and then went on to Gates Cambridge. So here are some initial criteria that Fulbright provides in their general spiel about the Fulbright student program. And I think it's important to think about the factors that are net on net positives for applicants as part of the overall prompt. They should help guide your writing of materials, guide how you're putting together all of your application. I've mentioned this already. The quality and feasibility of the proposal is probably one of the most important. So I think what sometimes happens with Barnard applicants, particularly in the early stages of their proposal, is they see Fulbright. It's easy to think about it as this kind of enormous, scary, super prestigious thing. And as a result, we get a lot of first draft proposals that propose solutions and address to huge, scary, gigantic global problems. We want you to be ambitious in what you're proposing, but we want you also to be careful that your project is feasible within the very short year-long framework of a Fulbright. Your academic or professional record is part of it. I think that it's important for everyone who might be on the call thinking in the background, like, I don't know if I have the GPA for a Fulbright. We want you to apply. I don't want anybody walking away from this presentation today thinking that they are somehow made ineligible because they got a C at some point at Barnard, right? Fulbright is not a fellowship that places undue emphasis on academic achievement versus the quality or feasibility of individual proposals, right? So if you're concerned about GPA for any reason, we want you to talk to us about it, but also we don't want you to feel like you are not welcome to apply to this program, right? We've seen people from across academic performance, the academic performance spectrum, do really well. It seems that the Fulbright Commission is one that recognizes that research can improve long-term intellectual trajectories. It can help prepare you for longer graduate study. So don't be turned away because of a fear that only people with certain GPAs apply to Fulbright from Barnard. There are all sorts of kind of qualitative ways to assess your personal qualifications. This may show up in interviews. So in some commissions, there is an interview component. I think that this is on the rise as different commissions want to make sure that they are interviewing candidates as part of holistic review. Your personal qualifications are also the kinds of things that you can talk about in the personal statement. What is the distance traveled? We often talk about it in terms of the distance that you've traveled in your life as a Barnard student, after Barnard. What are the kind of experiences that have shaped you? There may be language preparation requirements. This varies country by country. And so in some instances, different countries within even the same linguistic family may have different requirements. Your Spanish may need to be a different level in Mexico for ETA than in Argentina for doing research. And this is something you're going to have to suss out in partnership with us as you get advising through looking at the individual country commission sites. I've mentioned this several times. I'm going to keep hammering it home. The extent to which you and the project will help advance the Fulbright's key goals of advancing cultural exchange. We've talked about advancing diversity in country cohorts is an important element. So speaking to the ways that you're bringing diverse perspectives, a diverse identity, diverse intellectual approaches, all of these things are important. And then the final thing, just to reiterate 100 times, is that individual countries may have additional requirements of their candidates. And so it's important to understand not just what's on the Fulbright page mainly, but also what individual commissions are looking for. I should say too, all of these people that we've featured, all of these pictures, all of these folks are on LinkedIn. For those of you who've sat through my career spiels over the years, you know that I'm a huge fan of reaching out to Barnard alumni, reaching out to fellow students, and connecting and asking what was the process of of applying to Fulbright like? What was your experience, Ellie, in Romania, or Hannah in Mexico? Talking to people about their immediate previous experience, and we will feature alumni this summer. The hope is to have an alumni panel on Fulbright to help guide your applications, but reaching out and talking to people not only about what their experience was, but about what their application process was specific to individual countries can be helpful to you. Okay, timelines. This is the general timeline. It's actually fairly straightforward. There's a lot of kind of consternation about the institutional deadline versus the Fulbright commission deadline, but I want to lay that out for you right now. Between now and September, this is when you are going to be designing your project, preparing application materials, participating in advising at Beyond Barnard, and also just connecting with each other and with us on revising your faculty recommenders and your employer recommenders, and potentially individuals at institutions in country with which you will be affiliated to get your materials together. We will in June, and don't worry, we will email you all about this. There will be a June deadline to express your interest in Fulbright at Barnard. We want you to basically put your hand up and say, I didn't just go to an info session, I didn't just talk to someone about this, but I'm affirmatively interested in applying to Fulbright. We're just gonna ask you to say you're still interested. Pep Talk time, part 1, we want you to apply. Right? This is a rigorous process. It is one that allows for many opportunities for self-reflection and growth. And we want everybody here today, except for those of you who are still like first years, sophomores, and juniors, we're excited for you to apply next year as soon as possible. But for those of you who are eligible this year, we want you to apply. I can't tell you how badly we want more applications every year. And I'll tell you right now, the past 2 years, we have hit a ceiling at Barnard of 35 applicants. I would love this year to set a goal of 50 applicants to Fulbright. I should mention you are not all in competition with each other. So we advance as many candidates as we are eligible to by the commission to advance. And in the past couple of years, I think that means that everyone with eligible applications has been advanced and institutionally supported by Barnard. We want to support your success in this process. We want you to apply for Fulbrights. So we'll ask you to express your continued interest in June, and that will help make sure that you continue to get updates, encouragements, resources throughout the entire summer so that you can check in and get your application done by what is typically the September 1 campus deadline. So typically right around the start of classes, right around Labor Day, that's when we ask Barnard students to submit all of their materials, their complete application packet to Barnard. What happens if you do not get the CCE support? Gina, I don't know the answer because no one that I know of in the last 3 years that I've been here who has sought the endorsement of Barnard, who has a full application, has not been endorsed and advanced by Barnard. Just to say it again, we want you to be institutionally endorsed. We want you to succeed in this process. You are welcome to proceed without the institutional endorsement letter, but I would say that net on net, individuals who have Barnard's institutional endorsement, or if you're a graduate student and you think there is a better chance of, not a better chance, if you think it's a better fit for you to apply as a graduate student through your graduate institution, you're certainly welcome to do that with their institutional endorsement. But Gina, really the honest answer is I don't know what happens because it literally hasn't happened in my entire time here. The institutional endorsement is guaranteed by the Committee on Honors, which is a panel of faculty. After you submit your materials at the beginning of September, we will schedule an interview with the Committee on Honors so that you have the opportunity to practice talking about yourself, to practice articulating what you're going to achieve as a Fulbright, as an ETA, or in the research program, and to get some feedback on the final versions of your materials. So you'll be editing your materials again in September so that you can send them to the commission by the October 12th, 2021 deadline. And I just want to clarify, we will encourage everyone to submit to Fulbright prior to October 12th. So if you're marking your calendar in red today, I would definitely say mark September 1st in red and mark October 10th in red. We want to make sure that no matter what happens on the internet on October 12th, that your application is already safely in and submitted, so you don't have to worry. There is a pretty long gap between submission and when you start to hear. And also one of the frustrating things for candidates about Fulbright is that each commission's timeline is a little bit different. So you won't hear really anything until at least January. And at that point, individual commissions may name semifinalists. Making it to be a Fulbright semifinalist is already a gigantic deal. I encourage people to put it on their resumes. I think it's a huge cut and it's a big achievement. You may at that point be invited to participate in an interview. Some countries have interviews, others do not. In either case, you will likely hear final notification not before March and probably not after June. Every year, several Barnard students are named as recipients. Others are named initially as alternates. I should say that in the past year, primarily due to COVID, there has been a slight increase in the number of alternates and a slight decrease in the number of recipients. We're seeing this in countries like India, for example, where there is currently, as we all know, a kind of incredible and deeply tragic wave of COVID. And so we do not know if alternates will convert into recipients, but sometimes there are external forces that make it less probable that a candidate will be named to Fulbright. There just might not be a Fulbright program in countries that are experiencing different kinds of crisis. That said, this year we already have 5 recipients and we have an additional 4 alternates, and we will know by June whether those additional alternates will convert to recipients or stay as alternates. Again, I always say that being an alternate is an incredible honor and should absolutely go on CVs and resumes. So that's the basic timeline for notification. Expressing your initial interest in June, starting on some aspects of the application as soon as today, if you're game to get going, highlighting September 1st as the Barnard institutional deadline, and then throughout September into October, conducting interviews with Committee on Honors before getting the institutional endorsement. And I would say again, in red on your calendars, please mark October 10th, not the actual deadline of October 12th, to make sure that everything is submitted. Where can you start? As I've mentioned, these are the things that I'm hoping you can feel free to get a start on today, even before Molly arrives and you can start doing more individual advising. The first is to get going talking to faculty and or other individuals that could be strong letters of recommendation writers for you. Giving people enough time, having conversations about them with potential projects, about things that are making you excited about Fulbright, giving yourself some leeway, and just getting to yes earlier is a huge, it's a huge weight off people's chest. It also helps motivate you. Once people say yes, they are excited to write for you to endorse your Fulbright project. I find that it's just likelier that you're going to follow all the way through. You know you have people in your court to support your application, and hopefully that gets you excited about following all the way through and applying. I think it's really an important time to reflect on your intellectual and professional goals now. To ask yourself very directly, why do I want to do Fulbright specifically? What is it about not just the opportunity of studying abroad, but studying under the auspices of the Fulbright Commission that is exciting to me? I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. I do think it's really beneficial for you just to get familiar with not only the Fulbright's website, but also the individual country commission websites. This is where you're going to get a good sense of what individual countries are looking for in candidates, if there are supplemental materials that they require. I think now is also a good time to, talk to us. I'm happy to answer questions about people from individual countries. I'm not going to answer individual questions about do we have a Fulbright from Japan, do we have a Fulbright on this call today, but I'm always happy to follow up with individuals to try to connect you with alumni. I think it's great to get out there and talk to people who have received Fulbrights in the past about their experience, both doing the Fulbright and applying. I think it's certainly reasonable once you take a look at what's expected of you for the statement of grant purpose and the personal statement to get started on outlines, just sketching out ideas Not necessarily, unless this is something unless you're the kind of person that likes to just sit down and start writing, not necessarily to draft anything yet, but instead to get your ideas organized about what you think you might want to achieve and how you might achieve it. And then also importantly, to identify individuals and institutions whose research interests might align with yours abroad. So this may be researching national universities in the countries where you're anticipating doing work. It may be reading faculty bios in those institutions. It may be reviewing journal articles written by those individuals. It may be asking faculty who will write letters of recommendation for you about who they know that's doing work on international public health interventions in Peru. You might want to talk to Barnard faculty first, or Columbia faculty, or anyone who's going to be writing your recommendation about institutions and individuals that might be a good fit given your stated interests. So I want to add a couple of points, and this is really from my observation of working with Barnard candidates, both students and alumni on Fulbright in the last several years. So these are humble observations. They are offered as personal perspectives and hopefully, like 2% pep talky about how you can think about the next steps towards applying for Fulbright in the next couple of weeks and months. First of all, I want to really encourage you. Fulbrights are for students like you. Barnard students and alumni are incredibly effective, incredibly successful, not only in receiving Fulbrights, but in inflecting their academic and personal trajectories thanks to the application process that Fulbright requires. For those of you who are thinking about potentially applying to master's programs, by beginning the Fulbright process now, thinking about the entire summer, about faculty letters of recommendation, statements of purpose, research agendas, new trajectories, you will become a more successful applicant to whatever program you might apply to in the fall, if that's your ambition. You may have a better or different understanding of what you want to achieve with your intellectual and professional work, thanks to the process. You will definitely build relationships with faculty, with former employers, with other advocates and mentors whose help you will rely upon at some point in the next couple of years and maybe down the road as well. That is to say, I really hope that you feel encouraged to apply. We're here to support you throughout it, because I can't think of someone from Barnard that I have ever met who's come to me saying they're interested in Fulbright and my reaction is, why? That's not, Fulbrights are absolutely for individuals with the training that you have. That said, I want you to reflect really specifically on what you want to achieve in Fulbright. This doesn't happen a ton here. It used to happen at UChicago a little bit more. No shade to my former employer. I love that place. But Fulbright is not a year-long study abroad in a foreign country. There are substantive differences between what you would accomplish during a semester abroad as a Barnard student and what you would be called upon to accomplish and do as a Fulbright US student participant. So there are substantive differences that you should be thinking about. What do you hope will be inflected about your intellectual trajectory by participating in Fulbright? Why do you want to go to country X? Why is it necessary for your intellectual, personal, and professional development? And what is it about the cultural exchange opportunities that Fulbright would provide you that you are excited about this program in particular? I want to give you one piece of advice about personal statements and about statements of grant purpose that has served students well, I think, in the past as well. Fulbright is not just an opportunity for you. So I see a lot of first drafts of statements that emphasize all of the ways in which Fulbright is a fantastic opportunity for you to change or to amplify your professional trajectory or to change your intellectual work. It absolutely is an opportunity for you. But I do think that there is an element in which successful statements of purpose, successful personal statements, both of these two different research grant purpose and personal statements, can benefit from saying what you intend to contribute, not only in the country where you are participating in Fulbright, not only to the intellectual or pedagogical work that you do, but also to the community of Fulbright recipients before you. What do you hope to bring? What do you hope to contribute to that community as a Fulbright? right? So there's this element of service and commitment and community that I think emphasizing can be beneficial. I know this is obvious. The world is much bigger than Western Europe and definitely bigger than England. So this is a little bit of a dual-edged, not to mix metaphors here, but it's a double-sided sword here. There are countries that attract huge numbers of applicants. Some of those countries have huge numbers of spots to accommodate that huge number of applicants. But I would like to really encourage you to think about where you can do your work and where your work could do the most good. Those places may be off the beaten path. It may be outside of proposing a project at Oxford for 1 year to do a master's as a Fulbright. It may be that the best fit for you could be in Canada at McGill. It could be at the University of Melbourne in Australia or in Auckland in New Zealand. I want you to think about how you can bring your Barnard work to a country where there are lots of opportunities to do really interesting intellectual projects, where you can thrive, where you can push yourself to have an experience that the Fulbright Commission wants to see scholars excited about, right? So I think that there is and has been a focus on Fulbrights to Western Europe in terms of our overall applicant pool. I would say this, that we have had great success in some of the individuals that I showed you, Portugal for sure, but there is a big world out there and there are lots of Fulbright spots in surprising places. And I want to encourage all of you to think creatively about where is a really strong fit for you in terms of your intellectual interests. Where can you do a project that will be really exciting and maybe in a place that is not, 100% at the top of your list. Just to say this once more, this is the coach Pep Talk. I know I don't really look like much of an intimidating football coach. I'm wearing a cactus shirt today, but you cannot get a Fulbright if you don't apply. So I do want you all to think smart and strategically about the kinds of places you're interested in doing work, the kinds of countries and institutional contexts that could benefit most from your big brains and your big hearts. But I do want you to just apply where you think that you are a strong fit and where you find a project or a teaching opportunity that really resonates with your objectives as a person, as a scholar, as a Barnard student or alum. You cannot get one of these things if you don't apply. And I promise you that the process of applying to Fulbright can be really meaningful to people, regardless of how it shakes out. That's my real pitch on why to apply. It's great to get a Fulbright, but it is really a transformative experience to reflect on what your intellectual goals are and to work with people who are in your court to make you as strong an applicant as possible. So I really hope everybody who's eligible this year on the call today will not only apply, but that you'll encourage some of your friends to apply. Every year we have Barnard students apply to the same country. And in some instances we have we have two going to Taiwan this year. I promise you, you're really not competing with one another. There's not like the commission doesn't say, well, we've got 3 Barnard students, we only can choose one. It's really not the case. We've had multiple students go to the same country in the past. And we also hope that many of you will scatter around the world and apply to Fulbrights in really amazing places. And we're here to support you throughout that entire process. We're at 4. I stopped talking at 4 on the dot, but I also am happy to stick around for a few minutes for those of you who have initial questions. I want to clarify, Molly will be here June 1st. Availability to meet with her in Handshake will appear shortly after that. I am certainly open to you for questions, support, rah-rah. If the Pep Talk thing helps, tell me. I'm here to be supportive of you. That's my email address. I'm going to stop the recording now and invite any of you to ask questions. And of course, if you need to get out there and go enjoy a beautiful day, please do that as well, but certainly stay in touch. So thanks to those of you watching at home. I'm going to hit stop on the recording now. All right, I've got a few other questions in here, and I'm going to read a little bit more. So I know you talked a lot about being aware of specific country requirements, and it is understandably very tailored. Theoretically, can people apply to more than one place? No, you can only apply to one Fulbright per year, per cycle.